Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda, a living icon. Kenneth David Buchizia Kaunda, Zambia's founding president, fondly known simply as KK, a living hero amongst us. Foreigners identify our country as primarily a land of Kenneth Kaunda, our founding father, or a land of Kalusha Bwalia, our soccer icon. But mostly they identify our country by your name, Kenneth Kaunda, KK. You were born the youngest of 8 children, yet you are the giant of the family that history will remember. Your father, Reverend David Kaunda, a distinguished man of the cloth and ordained missionary and teacher of the Church of Scotland Mission, a Presbyterian and Westminster Confession Church. You were born at Luwa Mission in Chinsali, but you followed the path of your father and became a teacher. Chinsali was remote from any major town, but important missions of the day, the Livingstone Mission, the United Free Church of Scotland, and the Catholic White Fathers at Ilondola ensured that your journey will start with mission education. It was not long that the suffering of a people called you for duty. You joined the liberation movement of your people and your country at a very young age. As if bearing on us colonial overlords, we are the indignity of our country, named after a British pioneer and industrialist, Cecil John Rhodes. We were Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia to be specific. Our southern neighbor was called Southern Rhodesia. We were Rhodesians. You trekked to the Copper Belt with your childhood brother, Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe. In 1948, you helped found the Northern Rhodesia African Congress with Godwin Mbikostalewanika. This was later to become the African National Congress with a new leader, Harry Mwanga Nkumbula. You became the Secretary General of the African National Congress in 1953. Colonial authorities threw you in prison very often. You suffered imprisonment so often that it instead emboldened you. Instead of weakening you, it strengthened you. Instead of scaring you, it gave you courage. It gave you hope instead of feeling helpless, because you understood the journey you were on. Our forefathers resisted slavery and early colonialism. They resisted to pay imposed taxes. They resisted forced wage labor. Through the new awakening of Christianity, our forefathers found hope and used to resist colonialism, the very vehicle that brought Christianity to our land. Welfare societies were formed as far back as 1912, when Donald Swale and your father, David Kaunda, formed the first welfare association. It was at Mwenzo Welfare Association to bring to the attention of the colonial government views of the African in his own land. Our minor workers organized themselves into Zambia's first organized strike in 1935. The strike was on the Copper Belt and at Broken Hill, modern-day Kabwe. They protested against low slave wages and inhuman working conditions. In 1946, Dautiamba formed the Federation of African Societies at Broken Hill, now Kabwe. This was not only a direct response against colonialism, but a response to increase European settlers' drive of local politics, local power, and acquisition of land. In 1948, all the welfare societies came together and came under the banner Northern Rhodesia Welfare Societies, led by Godwin Mbikostalewanika. But of importance during this period was the formation of the African Mine Workers Association, led by Lawrence Katilungu. These became important tools and vehicles to challenge colonial authorities, especially in later years. In 1951, the Northern Rhodesia Welfare Society was transformed to become the African National Congress and was now led by Harry Mwangankumbula, and you as the Secretary General. During this period, also, a woman prophet, Alice Mlengalenshina, birthed the largest indigenous grouping, a church that Zambia has never seen before. The monumental and profound role of this woman to the cause of Africa, spiritual growth, can be discussed later. It was your impatience with a sense of change that progressives like you broke ranks with the ANC and formed the Zambia Africa National Congress in 1958. Colonial authorities saw what was different about this new party and immediately banned it, and they threw you in prison. But other comrades sprang to nurture the new radical ideas you and Simon Mwansaka-Pwepwe had professed. Mainza Chona, Paul Kalichini, Dickson Konkola, Solomon Kalulu, and others went to work and founded your liberation movement, the United Nations Independence Party, UNIP. It is with UNIP that you led our country to national independence. It is UNIP that you founded a nation anchored in unity despite its diversity. A nation with only 109 university graduates at birth to now thousands of such graduates serving as medical doctors, nurses, engineers, teachers, bankers, and leaders in some of the best institutions and firms across the world. A country you founded only with one trunk road, but you built a lot of infrastructure in roads, in bridges, hospitals, clinics, universities, colleges, and secondary schools. You built a nation out of what seemingly was nothing. It was your selfless role, however, in the struggle of Southern Africa that sets you apart from many, that you grew your stature from a young man from Chinsali to a saint that will regard you. This lifted the banner of Zambia. This has won our people the distinguished and revered role of liberators. It has made Lusaka a city of hope, a city of freedom, a city of accords, a city of liberation. Because Dr. Kaunda, you said, if Africa is not free, Zambia is not free. Because you were guided by your early Christian teachings and principles that have guided your walk. Love your neighbor as yourself, as proclaimed by the Gospel of Mark 12, verse 30 to 31. For those that know you, they know you will have proceeded this verse with, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Your cause was helped by many factors. In 1960, after a visit for a month of British colonies in Africa, Conservative Prime Minister Harold Macmillan delivered his most profound speech in the Parliament of South Africa, The Wind of Change. We should remember this was significant, especially that the National Party shortly after had won power and declared apartheid as law in 1948. Harold Macmillan pronounced that Britain would not stand in the way of cause for African self-rule or independence in the colonies, overseas territories, or land that it held. So, shortly after that, we became independent in 1964. But not for South Africa, not for Southern Rhodesia, not for Southwest Africa. As a huge white settler and minority communities could not voluntarily cede power to blacks because of a noble speech, they could also not give up these territories to their rightful owner. On the other side, Lusophone countries, Angola and Mozambique, were under the rule of Lisbon and Portugal. You didn't ask what was required to do. You immediately embarked on a journey to help free the region when the white minority government led by Ian Douglas Smith in Southern Rhodesia declared the unilateral Declaration of Independence on 11th November 1965, both the United Kingdom and Commonwealth imposed economic sanctions on the country. You immediately declared the UDI as an affront to Africa's quest for freedom and independence. Zambia bore the brunt of these sanctions. Zambia's access and supply route to the seaport for its import and exports were through Salisbury to Durban, through Lobito Bay, through the Benguela line, or through Beira. Because these were satellite states under the influence of the apartheid regime, our access to the sea was immediately shut. But you immediately embarked on a fresh sea route through Dar es Salaam, although it took a long, arduous 10 years. You built, with the help of the Chinese, the TAZARA, Tanzania-Zambia Railways. You built the Tanzania-Zambia Mafuta Pipeline, TAZAMA. And you built the Great North Road, which was what was called the Hell Run. But this was at a great cost to our economy and its savings. Further, the regular military raids into Zambia by both Ian Smith and apartheid South Africa forced you to direct some of the resources to our military capability. But this was not the only sacrifice you made. Together with Tanzania's founding president, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, you adopted liberation movements from the region as your own and made Zambia a host country for their stay. You facilitated their stay in Lusaka for its leaders. You created military camps for its military wings. You provided education and jobs for the youths. You provided diplomatic passports for the leaders. And you gave financial subventions to the cause. You helped the People's Movement for Liberation of Angola, MPLA, and the National Union of Total Independence of Angola, UNITA. Remember, at this stage, they were fighting alongside each other. This is before they separated fundamentally and were engaged in a proxy Cold War, and the two went on to fight one of Africa's longest civil war. You helped the Mozambique Liberation Front, Frelimo, which was founded in Dar es Salaam in 1962. After the Carnation Revolution in Portugal, which overthrew Estado Novo, both Angola and Mozambique became independent, and it looked like our burden was lifted, that your burden was lifted. But it was not so, because we border these countries. Rebel movements that sprang, especially supported by apartheid South Africa, in UNITA in Angola and Mozambique for Renamo, they caused terror on our borders and displaced huge population in their countries who became refugees in our country and settled in Zambia. You helped others. The Zimbabwe Africa's People's Union, ZAPU, led by Joshua Nkomo, and the Zimbabwe African National Union, led by Ndabani Ngistole, which was later led by Robert Mugabe. ZANU formed the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, led by Herbert Chitepo, and the camps were held in Lusaka. While ZAPU's military wing, Zimbabwe People's Liberation Army, ZIPRA, also had its camps in Lusaka. Although after independence of Mozambique, ZANLA forces were moved to Mozambique and were based in Tete, we still had the Southwest Africa People's Organization, SWAPO, and its leader, Sam Nujoma, who were based in Lusaka. An institute, the United Nations Institute of Namibia, a professional college to train future civil servants and administrators for Namibia, was also based in Lusaka. SWAPO's military wing, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, PLAN, was also based in Lusaka after moving its headquarters from Tanzania. It later moved its headquarters to the frontline in Angola. Lastly, the Pan-African Congress and the African National Congress of South Africa were headquarters in our country, in Lusaka. They took up offices at the Liberation Center. The ANC's Radio Freedom broadcast from Makeni, but using our infrastructure at the Zambia Broadcasting Services. Their publication, Seshaba magazine, was produced using Zambia's local facilities. The ANC made their second home, Zambia, and we provided school, colleges, and universities for ANC and other exiles. It was a long, arduous decades of anxieties, wars, and destruction. But by 1990, all countries in Southern Africa had become independent. Nelson Mandela had been freed, and Adimba Toivo of Swapo had also been released from Robben Island prison in South Africa. And South Africa was finally on the last mile of its freedom. But all this had taken a toll on you, on the economy of Zambia, and on our politics. The fall of communism and the Soviet Union, one of the principal ally and financier to the cause of Africa's liberation, worsened matters. Zambians demanded that you revert the country to multipartyism. You granted their wishes. Zambians demanded that you call for early elections. 2 years ahead of schedule, you granted that. Elections were held on 31st October 1991. You lost that election. You lost that election to a young and trade unionist leader, Frederick Jacob Titus Chiluba. You handed over power with grace and dignity. All these matters, instead of diminishing your stature, in fact, grew your stature. The world now remembers your sacrifice. The world is amazed at your humility. The world is inspired by your commitment to the cause of suffering neighbor, the cause of Africa, and your loyalty to humanity. The world is hopeful of a better world where peace, unity, freedom, justice, equality, equity, prosperity reigns. The world remembers Dr. Kaunda. The world remembers KK.